वर्ल्ड बैंक के डायरेक्टर के साथ हमने कल जो इंटरव्यू किया है पाकिस्तान की इकोनॉमी के हवाले से आउटगोइंग डायरेक्टर एलांगो मचुपातो के साथ, वो आप देख सकेंगे आफ्टर द ब्रेक। Nazreen, welcome back. I am now joined by Mr. Elango Machupatto, the outgoing director of the World Bank for Pakistan. Mr. Elango has served in Pakistan for almost 5 years at a time period when Pakistani economy moved from one kind of crisis to the other, and World Bank has been a key player helping the government of Pakistan during these periods of transition. I have requested Mr. Elango to help me understand the role of the World Bank, especially in the moments of transition. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Elango, on behalf of the viewers of Channel 92, which are not only in Pakistan, but they're across the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Moed, for having me in your interview.
Yes. Mr. Elango, you have served here for almost 5 years. How do you see the role of an international institution like World Bank in a country like Pakistan?
So the World Bank Group, which includes the public sector institutions, the International Development Association, and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and our private sector arm, International Finance Corporation, our insurance agency, Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, all work in Pakistan. And our role here is threefold. One is to support the country in its poverty reduction efforts. And therefore, how can we continue to support the country's growth and more inclusive and sustainable growth? And what are the policies, what are the institutions needed, where are the investments needed, and what kind of a capacity is needed in the country? Second, our role is to look at the longer term issues like climate resilience and what can countries do from now to be able to start preparing themselves to cope with future risks. Third is to invest more in people, in human capital, and this is something very critically important for Pakistan, given the historical low human capital outcomes in this country.
So we can take them one by one, but first, what were your impressions when you were coming to Pakistan about the country, and how these impressions have changed?
So I first worked in Pakistan in the 90s, and then I hadn't come back in 20 years.
For how long were you here in the 90s?
I was just coming on and off on visits, spending a couple of weeks on various projects. But then I worked elsewhere in the bank in other parts of the world. And then I came back here in end of 2015, and by which time a lot had changed. And
in what respect?
So most independent observers would say Pakistan is a hard country to work and live in. This is largely based on probably the politics, the geopolitics. Second is, terrorism had taken root, and there were issues related to that, which, in fact, the World Bank itself, we had to move out all families, and this became a non-family posting. And third is, given the frequent boom and bust cycle in the economy, the sense was, nothing ever works in Pakistan. So those were the kind of, I would say, not the negative impressions. But then also on the positive side, people say it's a cricket-loving country, and I myself played cricket, so I love the game. So for me, that is something that connects and resonates. Second is, obviously, Pakistan is known for its food and the warmth of its people. And so these are some things, these are some other features.
From the economy's perspective, when you came here in 2015, where you saw the country and where you see the country now?
So Pakistan has been going through this every few years, the boom and bust cycle. You boom for a few years and then you start going down, and it hit the bust point. So when I came in 2015, that's when an IMF program was already in place and some of the structural issues were being addressed. And then when we saw the end of the IMF program a year and a half later, Pakistan was posting high growth rates, around, hit close to around 5%. And then you started seeing again the decline, and when the country entered 2018, another onset of the crisis was there, and which tells me that over the last 20-30 years the fundamental structural issues have not been addressed, and I can point to 2 or 3 of them.
You think it's a long-term issue?
It's a long-term issue, and
many people here, when they appear on television, the economists and the political leaders, they think that Pakistan was doing very well economically, for more than 5% growth rate, and then listening to international institutions like IMF and World Bank that you need to fix this, has actually, like raising the interest rate, high regulatory duties on import, and all these things have actually brought the growth rate down.
So you have two ways in which you can grow. You can invest, and grow, or you can consume and grow. So Pakistan's 5% growth rate was largely based on consumption.
Okay.
And if you take the historical investment rates of Pakistan, the private sector, it's hovered around 10%, half of what you see in the rest of South Asia.
Okay.
So if you want to create the kind of jobs you want and you want to grow at about 5, 6 or even above, you've got to get to an investment rate, both public and private, which is in the 25 to 30%. In the absence of
And
that...
why it hasn't happened in Pakistan from your analysis?
So one is, I think investors look for stability, investors look for predictability, and investors look for also robust decision making. And then Pakistan also has been having chronic power problems, which doesn't give reliability of power supply. Then it has got chronic logistics issue. For example, take the ease of doing business ranking on Pakistan was, kind of hovering around 135 to 145 for a long time. And only more recently, in the last couple of years,
in the
last couple of years, it's risen from 147 to 108, which is a good beginning.
Is it sustainable?
They have to keep sustaining because you're competing against other global economies. Everybody is reforming.
Right.
So you got to keep moving. You cannot say I succeeded 1 year and therefore I don't do anything because other countries will overtake. And this is a good indicator. Everybody looks at a country's attractiveness to investments.
Are you then saying that Pakistan's import-driven or consumption-driven economic growth of about 5% is not sustainable?
It's given the low investment rates, I think that should be where the focus should be. And you have to have high investment rates, so be able to kind of get to the growth rate. And with the current investment rate, you will only you achieve a growth potential of around 3 to 3.5%. That's the maximum you can do. So this is why you have to keep investing more. If you invest more, you're going to create more jobs. When you create more jobs, you're going to see more people moving out of poverty, and you're also going to see more consumption happening.
So, and in terms of the rupee's value,
Yeah.
there's the argument that if Pakistan had depreciated earlier in an optimum time, then things would not have gone from bad to worse.
Yeah, I think it was delayed for a while, and I think there is a school of thinking that to hold the strong rupee has its advantages, but we haven't seen it. And if you really look at exports versus the exchange rate, you clearly see there is a link between the two, where Pakistan has lost its export share over the last so many years when it continued to have a strong local currency.
So, but Pakistan's exports are not very large.
Yeah.
It's mostly dependent on remittances. So, but when the rupee depreciates, the people of Pakistan suffer a lot. How do you look from an economic perspective on that thing? Is the depreciation of rupee good apart from exports? Does it help a country?
No, in a sense, you got to look at what would be the right set of monetary policies that support both the broad economic growth as well as structural reforms and the fiscal policy. You can't look at in isolation of one versus the other. Obviously, in times of economic hardship, as you now see during the COVID times, you got to put in safety net programs so the poor and vulnerable don't get worse off.
You have also been, not only the World Bank, but other monetary institutions have been supporting the programs like BISP and then ESAS program. Do you think these programs help the economy?
Yeah, they help a lot because if you're looking at building an inclusive economy, or if you're looking at ways in which you can help the poor and vulnerable with better welfare gains, cash transfer programs with the conditional, unconditional have worked very well globally. And I think these are important part of, I would say, Pakistan's poverty reduction efforts that have gone on for the last so many decades, so many years.
You mentioned the challenges of the COVID. What role the bank has played in helping Pakistan?
So we have done a few things. First is we quickly mobilized around $40 to $45 million to make it available to provinces and the federal government for urgently needed medical supplies. This was sometime in mid-March. Then in early April, our board approved $200 million fund for pandemic response effectiveness in Pakistan, which supports around $148 million for emergency medical support, around $25 million for cash transfers through ESAS, then about $12 million for supporting food rations. So this is what
How do you see the challenges post-pandemic?
I think still the outbreak is happening. I think in my view, everybody's in the same situation. The countries that would come out strongest and quickest from pandemic are the ones who are best reforming, who have the right structural reforms in place. And if Pakistan continues its path of doing structural reforms, I think it can come out of the crisis and bounce back better.
You earlier mentioned that the rate of investment in Pakistan has been low, it should be about 25%, 20-25%. What are the major impediments other than the rate of investment you see in Pakistani development?
The other is, I think, Pakistan has, I think, sort of decades of, I would say, regulatory morass that actually has sort of made everything difficult to get decisions done. So I think there's a need to start looking at simplifying regulations. The third is the whole public investment planning also takes a long time. For example, take the World Bank, like from concept to our first disbursement, that means first amounts of money that get disbursed to a project or to people, takes about 20 months. And I think there is scope for further simplification there. Another aspect would be the human resources capacity and skills, which have to continuously be upgraded and be strengthened. And I think Pakistan...
I heard reading you've been talking a lot about human investment, human potential.
Yeah.
What is that?
So human capital, we say, is basically like, both education and health. Like, for example, Pakistan has a very high rate of learning poverty, which is kids at the age of 10 and below cannot read or write. And this, you're talking about that is being a 75%. To me, without the kind of human capital and with high rates of stunting you have, that will affect cognitive skills, which are both needed as Pakistan wants to embrace digitization and move more into the digital space, which is something, again, there is huge opportunity for Pakistan, and especially given that you have a very young and youthful population. This is something...
Are these indices worse than the corresponding indices in developing world now?